All right, so are you ready to get into some biblical drama?
I am.
Okay, good, good, because that's what we're doing today.
All right.
We're diving into the premiere of Amazon's House of David.
Okay.
Yeah, big battles, lots and lots of questions about, power, faith, leadership, the whole nine yards.
Ugh.
And we've got a ton of sources here, like recaps, reviews, some deeper analysis, to help us really get into this first episode.
Sounds good.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully by the end we'll be able to, you know, tell you if it's worth your time or not.
Awesome.
Okay, so right off the bat, they really throw us into, some pretty intense stuff. We've got young David facing a lion, and then,
Oh, wow.
yeah, and then on the other hand, we have a much older King Saul who's dealing with like some serious inner turmoil. Like right away, it feels like they're setting up this contrast.
Yeah, I see that. You've got like youthful courage versus, the weight of all that responsibility of leadership.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Okay.
innocence versus experience,
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is how closely the show seems to be sticking to the book of Samuel, like the source material.
Oh, so they're not shying away from the biblical stuff.
No, no, they're not. I mean, they're even including some of the potentially controversial parts, like the Amalekites and their destruction.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they handle that because, that could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because the reviewer, we have actually had some pretty positive things to say about how the show's tackling those trickier parts of the story.
Really?
Yeah, they actually praised the show for taking that risk.
Mm.
They said the creators aren't shying away from, the big complex and sometimes uncomfortable parts of the biblical narrative.
Hmm.
And from what I've read, they seem to be doing it in a way that's actually thought-provoking and engaging.
Okay, that's good to hear. Because I have to say, when I was reading through the recap, one thing that really jumped out at me was this constant thread of fear running through the
Oh,
episode.
fear, how so?
Well, you've got David battling the lion, obviously.
Right.
And then his father's words about fear being a thief.
Hmm.
And even the decision Saul's making, it's almost like fear is this driving force behind everything.
Wow. That is interesting. I mean, it makes sense, though, when you think about it. Fear is such a huge part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And it plays such a big role in our lives, too. We've got anxieties about the future, about leadership, even about faith itself.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this show is kind of tapping into those anxieties.
Oh, absolutely. It's like they're holding up a mirror to us in a way, forcing
Yeah.
us to confront our own fears.
Exactly.
But anyway, getting back to the show itself. The reviewer specifically mentioned how House of David uses fear to contrast the different types of leadership we see.
Ah.
So you've got David's courage, in the face of danger.
Right.
And then you've got Saul, who is totally crippled by fear, which leads him to make some pretty questionable choices, even disobeying God.
Yeah. That's a really good point. It's like they're showing us how fear can motivate us, but also how it can totally paralyze us.
Right, and the reviewer even pointed out how Jonathan Saul's son embodies a different kind of fear altogether.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like a healthy fear, a fear for his people,
Interesting.
which honestly makes him seem like a much more appealing leader than his power-hungry brother Eshbal.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
It's like they're giving us these three totally different models of leadership and then asking us, okay, which one do you connect with most?
Right.
Yeah,
It's making us think about what kind of leaders we want to be.
I like that.
Yeah. And, speaking of appealing characters, the reviewer also made this interesting comparison to Dune.
Dune. Okay.
Yeah, they found some parallels between Maisol's narration and David's journey, which I thought was pretty cool.
Huh. I can kind of see that. Both stories are about young men thrust into these extraordinary circumstances, right?
Right. And they have to face these incredible challenges and tap into their inner strength to overcome adversity. Yeah, it's that classic hero's journey. And I think that resonates with people, regardless of their religious beliefs.
Totally. Okay, so you've got these complex characters in epic scope. This whole exploration of fear, it sounds like House of David is off to a pretty good start.
Yeah, so far so good.
But the reviewer wasn't all praise, right?
Oh, right. They did have a few criticisms.
Like what?
Well, they felt the opening sequence was a bit redundant, and they thought David's arc could be more dynamic.
Yep.
And some of the effects they used to portray Saul's mental state were maybe a little over the top.
Interesting. I'm curious, though. Did the reviewer think those criticisms ultimately took away from the overall experience?
That's a good question. From what I gathered, they were more like constructive criticisms than deal breakers.
Okay.
The reviewers still seemed to recognize the show's ambition and its potential,
Yeah.
and they definitely seemed excited to see where the story goes next.
So even with a few bumps in the road, it still sounds like House of David is a show worth checking out.
I think so, yeah. It's definitely raising some interesting questions for us as viewers.
Oh, like, don't leave me hanging.
Well, for one, how do we reconcile the more brutal aspects of the biblical narrative with our modern sensibilities?
Mm-hmm.
The show doesn't shy away from depicting the violence of that time period.
Right.
And I think that's going to challenge some viewers for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we live in a world where violence is constantly in the headlines.
Yeah,
But we also have a much stronger sense of human rights and the value of every life than they did back then.
absolutely.
It'll be interesting to see how the show navigates that tension.
It definitely will. And I
Yeah.
think it's important to remember that the Bible itself was written in a very different time and place,
Right.
with very different cultural norms and understandings of justice.
Mm.
The show seems to be acknowledging that complexity
Yeah.
and inviting us to wrestle with it too.
Which is really cool. I mean, it makes me think about how we interpret these stories today. Are we supposed to take them literally? Or are they meant to be understood on a more symbolic level?
Yeah, that's a question that theologians and scholars have been debating for centuries.
I bet.
And honestly, I think House of David is tapping into that very debate, even if it's not explicitly picking a side.
Which is probably the smartest approach. It
Right.
lets viewers come to their own conclusions without feeling like they're being preached at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us back to this idea of fear
Yeah.
and how it shapes our interpretations.
Yeah.
Are we afraid of challenging traditional beliefs,
Hmm.
or are we afraid of embracing new perspectives?
Wow, that is deep. And it makes me think about what the reviewer said about the Amalekites.
Oh, yeah.
They said that the show didn't shy away from depicting their destruction,
Right.
but it also presented them in a way that really highlighted their brutality. So, making them a genuine threat to the Israelites.
Yeah, so it's not just a simple good versus evil situation.
Right.
There's nuance there.
Exactly. The show seems to be acknowledging the complexities of history and the different perspectives involved.
Right. And that makes it more relevant to our world today where things are rarely so black and white.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got these complex characters, this exploration of fear and leadership, and this willingness to grapple with the messy realities of history.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like House of David is offering a lot more than just a simple retelling of a biblical story.
It definitely is. And I think that's what makes it so compelling. It's not just entertainment. It's like a conversation starter.
Mm.
It's making us think about our own beliefs,
Mm.
our own values, and how we navigate a world that's full of challenges and complexities.
I love that because at the end of the day, that's what a good story should do, right?
Right.
It should make us think, make us feel, and maybe even make us want to be a little bit better, a little bit braver,
Right.
a little bit more compassionate.
Absolutely. And, that brings us back to you, the listener.
Yeah.
What are your takeaways from this deep dive so far?
What aspects of the show are really resonating with you?
What are your lions, so to speak?
Ooh, I like that.
What are the fears that are holding you back in your own life? And what kind of courage do you need to face them?
These are big questions, but I think they're worth asking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think House of David is giving us a framework for exploring them.
I agree. And, while the show doesn't necessarily give us easy answers,
Right.
it does present us with these compelling characters and thought-provoking themes and, a visually stunning world that's hard to resist.
Plus, the reviewer mentioned some pretty epic battle scenes and a killer soundtrack.
Oh, yeah. Can't forget about that.
So even if you're not, a diehard fan of biblical stories, House of David might still surprise you.
Definitely could.
It's a show that's both epic in scope and intensely personal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sure to spark some, interesting conversations.
For sure.
And it makes you think about how we interpret these stories today. Like, are we supposed to take them literally, or are they meant to be understood on a more, symbolic level?
Right. I mean, that's a question that, theologians and scholars have been debating for centuries.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big one. And it feels like House of David is kind of tapping into that debate, even if it's not, explicitly taking sides.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing, though,
Yeah.
It lets viewers come to their own conclusions about it.
Right. Without feeling like the show is preaching at them.
Exactly. And, that kind of brings us back to this idea of fear
Okay.
and how it shapes our interpretations of things. Like,
Mhm.
are we afraid of challenging traditional beliefs, or are we afraid of, embracing new perspectives?
That's a good question. And it makes me think about what the reviewer said about the Amalekites.
Oh, yeah.
They said the show didn't shy away from depicting their destruction,
Yeah.
but it also presented them in a way that really highlighted their brutality. Like they were a genuine threat to the Israelites.
Yeah, so it's not just a simple good versus evil kind of situation.
No, not at all. It feels much more nuanced than that.
Right. There are shades of gray.
Exactly. It seems like they're acknowledging the complexities of history and all the different perspectives involved.
And that makes it so much more relevant to our world today, where
Yeah,
things are rarely so black and white.
absolutely. Okay, so we've got these complex characters and this exploration of fear and leadership and a willingness to grapple with the messy realities of history,
Yeah.
for sure.
Well,
It sounds like House of David is offering a lot more than just a simple retelling of a biblical story.
it really does. And I think that's what makes it so interesting to talk about. It's not just entertainment. It's like a starting point for deeper conversations.
I like that. It's a conversation starter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It makes us think about our own beliefs and our values and
Yeah.
how we navigate a world that's, full of challenges and complexities.
And I think that's what good art should do, right?
Absolutely.
Should make us think, make us feel, make us want to be better people.
Right. And speaking of making us feel, we haven't talked much about Saul and how the show portrays him.
Yeah, that's true. The reviewer mentioned that they found his portrayal to be really layered, like he's flawed, even tyrannical at times, but there's also this sense of tragedy to his downfall.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense given what we've been talking about with fear.
Hmm.
Saul is clearly a man who is driven by fear. Fear of losing his power, fear of seeming weak, fear of disappointing God.
And all those fears ultimately lead him down a pretty dark path.
They do. And it's almost like the show is saying that fear can corrupt even the most well-intentioned leader.
Which is a cautionary tale that's relevant for any era, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Huh.
We've seen it time and again throughout history. Leaders who let fear control their actions, and it often ends in disaster.
Yeah, you're right. But then on the other hand, we have Jonathan, who the reviewer praised for being kind of a moral compass in the show.
Yeah, Jonathan's interesting.
He's always questioning his father's actions, and his choices seem to be guided by this sense of justice and compassion.
He represents a kind of hope, amidst all the darkness and the violence.
I like that.
He's not afraid to stand up to his father, even when it puts him at risk.
Right. And it seems like he's really struggling with his own sense of duty and what it actually means to be a good leader.
Yeah, he's wrestling with some big questions.
He's like the embodiment of that healthy fear we were talking about earlier.
Right, the fear for his
A
people.
kind of fear that drives you to do what's right, even when it's really difficult.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important message for people to hear, especially today,
Yeah.
when it's easy to feel cynical about leadership.
Right. House of David is reminding us that there are still people out there who are willing to fight for what they believe in.
Yeah, even when it seems like everyone's against them.
So we've got complex characters, this exploration of fear and leadership, and this willingness to engage with the messy realities of history. It sounds like House of David is offering a lot more than just a retelling of an old story.
It definitely is. It's
Yeah.
more like a reflection of ourselves and the world we live in.
Yeah. It's forcing us to ask some tough questions about ourselves and about the kind of world we want to create.
And that's what makes it so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just entertainment. It's an invitation to think critically and to engage with these important ideas.
I love that. It's funny, we often think of these ancient stories as being so removed from our modern lives,
Right.
but it seems like House of David might actually be more relevant than ever.
I think so too. It's like the power of good storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can transcend time and place and tap into these like universal themes that resonate with us no matter who we are or what we believe.
Exactly. And speaking of universal themes, I keep coming back to this idea of fear,
Yeah.
how it shapes our choices, our relationships, even our understanding of the world.
It's a huge part of the human experience, isn't it?
It really is. And the show seems to be suggesting that, fear isn't something we should just try to avoid or suppress,
Right.
but something we need to understand and confront.
It's interesting you say that because the reviewer actually mentioned that the show's creators were inspired by some of the latest research on fear.
Really?
Yeah, like how it affects the brain.
Hmm.
They actually consulted with neuroscientists
Wow.
to make sure that their portrayal of fear was
Yeah.
both accurate and insightful.
That's really cool. It sounds like they're really trying to get into the psychology of fear?
Yeah, not just use it as a cheap plot device.
Right. Which makes me think about how we can apply those insights to our own lives. What are the fears that are holding us back
Hmm.
from pursuing our goals or building relationships or just living a more fulfilling life?
It's like House of David is asking us those questions indirectly.
It is. And I think they're worth thinking about?
Definitely. And I think that's what makes this whole deep dive so valuable.
Yeah.
It's not just about, summarizing a show.
Mm.
It's about connecting it to our own experiences and using it as a starting point for,
Yeah,
some personal reflection.
I couldn't agree more. So to wrap things up, it sounds like House of David is offering a pretty potent blend of action and drama and some really thought-provoking themes.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty compelling show.
And if you're looking for something that will both entertain you and challenge you, I think this one's definitely worth checking out.
I agree. And as always, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the stories that matter to you.
Until next time, happy watching.